So, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting to order. And I'll start by acknowledging that we're meeting on the territory of the Wasanich people who've been caretakers of this area for millennia. So, committee, you have the agenda in front of you. Are there any additions or changes?
Move approval.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Moving on then to approval of the minutes. You have the minutes from February 3rd. Any amendments or questions, clarification?
Move adoption.
Okay. Second. So that's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Moving on to number 5, presentations. 5A, the first presentation is policing reports, the third and fourth quarters for 2019, and a presentation by Staff Sergeant Wayne Conley. Sir, you have the podium. And push the microphone. Yep.
There we go. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Happy to come back this evening and give you a policing report that will be a summary of year-end for 2019, and then a bit of a focus on 2020 policing priorities. So I start this evening with just a little bit of an update on the detachment resources as an update from last fall when I was here. 2 officers that from the detachment have transferred out since I was last here. Constable Megan DePass, who was our community policing officer, has now gone to West Shore, and Constable Nason has transferred up island to one of the traffic units in the North Island. We do have 2 replacement officers named. We have a Constable Gunton, who is coming out of Regina, or as we say in the RCMP, out of the factory. And he will be here in March. And then we have another officer who's been named Constable Cosgrove, who will be coming from Port McNeill, but he has a home to sell before he gets here, so that may be a little bit of a wait for that. Corporal Carrie Harding is now in charge of our community policing unit. She also, one of her duties is airport liaison. I was talking to Jeff about that. And Constable Paul Middlestat will be joining the unit, taking over for Megan DePass's position. He will be our new community policing officer. In the month of February, we had 3 officers that were deployed up to Houston to deal with the pipeline dispute up there. Unfortunately, one of the officers was injured in that thing, so I have him off duty at the current time, but hopefully we'll have those officers back to work soon. I thought I would just touch base for a minute on recent events in policing in the community. Of interest, we've been dealing with planning and preparations around the protest activity. So the January 20th incident that happened at BC Ferries, another event that was that did not materialize, but we thought would happen on February 15th, and then February 26th this past week with the closure of the blockade of Highway 17. So as you're probably well aware, BC Ferries have now an injunction, and so does the provincial government. Ministry of Highways have an injunction for Highway 17. So there's some court measures in place as we deal with that. Lots of traffic disruption, as you may have heard from residents in the community with that incident from last week. In this past month, there was one prolific offender that was arrested in connection with multiple thefts from Sydney businesses. This offender was located, was arrested, was placed on conditions of release. As we found out the next day, this same offender was on the ferry from Salt Spring, had been involved in an overnight incident of a break-in there and was in breach of the conditions that we had just released this person on, so was arrested again. As far as I know, is still in custody in relation to those new charges. There's also been multiple reports of theft from vehicles. We continue to wage that battle, some in Sydney and some in our neighboring community in North Saanich. Thought I'd take a little bit of time and talk about policing priorities and things that we have planned through analysis and some consultations. With respect to community policing, in 2020, we will continue with our theme of partners in prevention to create awareness on preventable crime. We continue to see that as an important thing for our community as we see continued problems with thefts from vehicles and theft of vehicles as well. We plan to expand the Block Watch program, which now has 60 neighborhood groups with block captains in each of those. That's Sydney and North Saanich. And this has resulted in a network and connection between police and the community, where awareness of the location of crime, where it's happening, how to prevent it, is being communicated on a regular basis. We are looking to build our volunteer programs to help with this prevention. The Speed Watch program, Citizens on Patrol, is still an active program in the community. We're looking to start a Cell Watch program, and we have restorative justice, and we're looking at a community bike patrol program as part of the Citizens on Patrol. We have reestablished the school liaison program, which focuses on safety awareness for our youth about pedestrian, internet safety, traffic safety, anti-bullying. There will also be participation in school events as we build relationships, and there's messaging around substance abuse. As we support our businesses in crime prevention, the initiatives that we will be focusing on are strategies to reduce shoplifting, to assist in the panhandling and trespass activities that we have from time to time. We will continue on with our public space initiatives. So that's an increase in policing presence and foot patrols in parks, in the along the waterfront, in the core areas of Sydney, Beacon Avenue. It is also intended to sort of assist with some of the calls that we receive regarding our homeless, the homeless in our community. Of interest, we had 540 contacts in 2019 with persons with no fixed address. So it's just an interesting thing that we'd sort of did a little analysis on that. On the property crime reduction front, our focus is on prolific repeat offenders, promoting the No Valuables Inside program that Constable DePass had started a year ago. We implement court release conditions for no-go and no contact and those sort of things for repeat offenders. On the traffic safety front, we plan to maintain enforcement for impaired driving through counterattack road checks and roadside screening. The Mayor and Council may be interested to know that in 2019, our detachment had 3 officers who were nominated to Alexis Team. I don't know if you're familiar with Alexis Team. Alexis Team was Constable Harris, Constable Edwards, and Constable Steffes. Alexis Team is I should have looked it up a little bit, but a young girl, I think 3 or 4 years of age, was killed by an impaired driver in the Lower Mainland many years ago. And so her family have implemented this program where officers who attain the intervention of 12 or more impaired drivers in a year can be nominated to that team. And we had 3 officers who have been nominated for this past year, so I'm quite proud of that. We continue with enforcement of distracted driving violations. the Cell Watch program, we hope to help with that. And then our focus on aggressive driving enforcement for excessive speed and intersection-related violations. On March 31st, Corporal Harding is in the process of organizing a volunteer and community policing information and appreciation session. I invite Mayor and Council to attend that. I believe at 7 p.m. It will be an opportunity for us to interact with all the volunteers of the Block Watch program, Citizens on Patrol, and Restorative Justice as we exchange just an appreciation to the service that they're providing to the community through their volunteerism. I will conclude with just touching base very quickly. You've probably had a chance to look at the year-end report that was prepared. Of interest or just highlights a 7% increase in calls for service. So I think it was up a couple hundred calls. The total was 3,247 calls for service in Sydney alone for last year. Quite interesting, persons held in custody for Sydney was up 75%. I don't know what to attribute that to. I'd have to do that analysis of that. Mental health calls increased 32%. Curfew checks where it was a huge increase. Traffic accidents decreased. That's a bit misleading because reportable traffic accidents now, they've raised the dollar value to $10,000. So if the officers attend an accident, and they will still attend an accident to make sure there's no traffic issues or whatever, but if the damage is minor, it's total under $10,000, they don't complete an accident report. Will not be doing ICBC's work for them. So we have impaired driving apprehensions up slightly, 10%, and traffic enforcement is down considerably. Part of that is because of our traffic officer being part of the quick response team to Houston, and he's up there deployed probably a week every month to 8 weeks. So he's been away a lot as part of that. And I think Sydney is, Mayor and Council are well aware of the budget things. There's capital projects for the building, and that's been covered in your budget meetings in the past month. But if you have any questions, that's kind of my report for Mayor and Council at this point.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Follett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Staff Sheldon Connolly. The homelessness seems to be a bit more obvious in Sydney than it has been in years past, and I remember over the Christmas holidays wanting to use a bank machine and catching someone sleeping in the vestibule of the bank in the middle of the day. So that's definitely something different than I'm accustomed to seeing in Sydney. And just looking at your stats and having read the P&R story about the count of homelessness is interesting. Now, I've just signed up to do the point-in-time count for March 12th, so, and specified that I would like to do Sydney if we've got someone who'll come out here to organize that. So I hope to be able to participate in that, because I think it is going to be an interesting view into what is going on there. Do you have any sense of, is the number of homelessness increasing property crime, or is that unrelated? And can you is there?
I don't know that I can do a total tie-in there for you, but a couple of things that may be helpful. So yes, we are seeing, a bit of an increase in our homeless situation. We find that our homeless here that come to the community are very transient in nature, like they come for a while. We have the ones that have been entrenched in the community for a long time, but there are others that come for a while and then they leave. The biggest reason for them coming here is they feel safer in the community than they do down in the city. The one piece that we are trying to do is to work with Terry Dory, who is with the Ministry of Poverty Reduction and Social Development. She's at Beacon Community Services each Friday. She's been well connected with the detachment. Every Wednesday, starting with Corporal Harding, they're going to be doing some walkabouts in the community to see if there are homeless who would like to have assistance, applying for social assistance, housing, or other things that she might be able to support them with. So that's one connection we are trying to make at this point.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Councillor Duncan, then O'Keefe, and then Garnet.
All right. I guess I'll start with my homeless related question because that's where Councillor Follett left off. Do we have, so I think from your report you had 500 and some odd encounters and there were 200 and some odd individuals. And then we know there's like a very small number who really stay in our community all the time and the rest move on. If you are called out to something, for example, like somebody sleeping in a vestibule, do you move them along? Are they taken to services down in Victoria, or are people just kind of left to, if they're not actually committing an actual crime at the time, they're just kind of moved along, or you have somewhere to go, or like how do you deal with them since we don't actually have an R place or shelter beds or anything up here, particularly in the wintertime?
Well, we do a couple of things. If they're interfering with a business or something, we definitely move them along. And we've had some issues with them going to the same location and being somewhat disruptive and trespassing, such as the banned shelter at Beacon Park, which became a site of a refuge, and we were trying to discourage that. We do provide them with bus tickets,
Okay.
so that if they're trying to get to shelter, that is just something that we do just as a gesture of goodwill to help them out in that way. We have the ability to, for those that might need it, like to connect them with Beacon Community Services. So Elaine Venables has been always very open to that sort of situation as well. But beyond that, that's kind of it. We often get a lot of calls about them being, just in places where they have been a bit disruptive, such as the food bank and places like that. So
That sounds
we
like
respond. We
yeah.
try to deal with it sensitively and be helpful. But and for the most part, a lot of them do not cause too many problems. But there are the occasional one that we like to know who's in the community, because there have been the odd one that have come into the community that have caused problems.
Yeah, I heard from our resident homeless guys that they say, I point out the ones that I knew from down south, that I point them out that they have trouble. So I
Yes.
believe. But it sounds, do we have, as this problem increases, is there a lot that you are doing that should be being done by more community services that we lack, or is it right now something that all of what you are doing is kind of within the scope that has kind of crept up on what social services police are expected to do now?
Well, certainly policing is impacted by it because of the things like was being shared. They seek refuge in a business sort of thing, or they're at the Mary Wins. So we're getting more calls, and you saw the increase in the calls. Mm-hmm. But we've had lots of discussions with administration, with Randy, and about strategies and how we sort of can make this the best situation for the community, with many things considered. There are lots of things to consider. Mm-hmm. So I think we continue to keep it on the forefront of how we deal with that. We've met with Public Works, who are out and about a lot in the community all day long, even more so than the police. And so, they're a pretty good partner for us if there's problems developing. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but.
Well, I guess it just kind of has to, that it sounds like you're being asked to do a lot of social services work that our community doesn't have the network that a larger city might have for some of that other services. I'm just worried about your guys' caseload being taken away from actual policing work and ended up as social services. But if you feel you've got enough conversations going that you're being supported there, then that's good. When you say cell watch, you mean cell phone watch?
Yes.
Okay, just to clarify that. And
For the distracted driving.
for the
piece.
distracted driving.
Yeah.
For the injunction, does that mean that as soon as protesters show up or somebody starts to blockade, then you would move into arrest? Or is it still like they can convene, but as soon as BC Ferries or Ministry of Transport says it's getting too disruptive, then you come? Like, does it stop the ability for them to gather and protest? Or is it just kind of make it quicker for you to be able to disperse it if it becomes too much of a disruption by some
It's
definition?
a very complex piece.
Yeah.
Because anytime that you're talking about a large group of people that have moved into a protest activity, you know, so you have to sort of assess the police resources that are available. And just to go back to the injunctions usually include a provision that give the police discretion about, you know, having the capability and it's not a must situation, but the authority is there for arrests. So in sort of responding to these things, there are lots of pieces to consider: the number of people, the number of police officers, what it would take to actually move into an arrest situation. So all of that's considered, the timelines involved, the level of disruption. But certainly closing a highway is a very serious matter in terms of disruption, cost, impacts to, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people. So that that's not taken lightly. And if we have the ability with the resources, we would call the TAC team from the RCMP to supplement the police resources in order to address it. Certainly, I don't mind saying that on February 15th, we were prepared to carry out arrests at BC Ferries. We had 50-some officers here, ready to go. Yeah.
My husband was stuck at the ferry terminal for the first one, wondering what had happened, why there were so many police there.
Yeah.
You show up on your bike, you get through, no problem. But
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, Councillor O'Keefe, then Garnett, and then Rento.
Okay, thank you for the report. A couple things that just caught my interest were assaults that were up 333%, and then a significant increase in break-in entries in commercial and residential. Just wondering if you can give us a little more insight, or whether there's pattern to that, or whether it's as a result, you mentioned earlier, sort of a chronic offender, whether it's something like that, or any sort of general pattern, or?
I might not be able to answer your question because
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't really drill into that. I mean,
Okay.
I know that with the break and enter thing, so in 2019, what we were experiencing was a lot of break-ins to condo parking lots, and then the lockers and all of that, and that would constitute you know, the break and enter piece.
Okay.
And then the assaults, as I look at the report, I'm seeing that the domestic violence reports were very similar to the previous year, so it's not that.
Okay.
And so I don't really know. I'd be happy to dig into that and just send an email forward and answer your question,
Sure.
as
Well,
as
yeah.
opposed
No,
to
I'm
it being an
just always,
unanswered one.
From an educational perspective for the community, I'm just
Right.
always looking at, is there certain things that are happening that, you know, if, you know, like the breaking and entering to vehicles. I think you, in the past, talked about the number of people that don't even bother to
Yeah.
lock their car. So just looking for any tidbits that we could pass along to the public if there's patterns like that, for
Well,
example,
certainly-
that you see. Yeah.
Certainly, you'll probably never hear me stop talking about the fact that the vehicle thing is a preventable crime, and that we continue to see vehicles with things like wallets or keys left in them. And recently there was a vehicle stolen that had the keys left in it and a wallet left in it, and it ended up in a stolen vehicle and a fraud because of the credit card stolen out of the wallet. So it's that sort of thing that I keep speaking to. As I say, it's preventable, and if we can get the community, so as I talk about partners in prevention, if we can help educate the community that, you know, don't leave these things in your vehicles, we'll have less of that type of crime.
Thanks. And one other question, just wondering about the statistics. So for looking at the impaired driving, it's kind of disappointing to see that they kind of are at the same level. So at first glance, it kind of looks like, you know, people are still continuing to do this, but despite best efforts. But I'm wondering how these statistics are impacted by the degree of, you mentioned before, like staffing levels, so, and the number of targeted campaigns. And so I'm wondering, obviously, if you're doing more targeted campaigns, or if your resources are such that you can't be doing what you normally do, that's going to impact the statistics. And so I'm wondering if there's any sort of statistics that are kept that, for example, out of 100 vehicles stopped, you know, the normal rate is like, I don't know, 1% out of 100 people would be impaired, or whether there's information like that available.
Well, it's a very good question, and I think a couple of comments that I can make around that is that statistics can be misleading. So the statistics around the number of impaired drivers has a lot to do with the number of checks that officers make. But on the good news side of this, I will tell you that when the officers are doing the road checks, they encounter a very, very low number of impaired drivers. So I have been out with the officers and spent an entire evening and not encountered an impaired driver. And we've checked hundreds of cars.
Oh, that's
So
good
that's
to hear.
on the good side of it. But so it goes to, it also speaks to the amount of effort that goes into detecting impaired drivers, and the amount of energy that takes is quite significant. When you think in Sydney last year there was 53 impaired driving apprehensions in Sydney alone, and a similar number in North Saanich. So, yeah.
Good, thanks.
Councillor Garnett, and then Renton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Staff Sergeant Connolly. You stole my thunder, Councillor O'Keefe. You asked two of my questions. So I'll just go for the simple one. You mentioned the appreciation March 31st, 7. Where will it be taking place?
Mary Winspear.
Mary Winspear.
Yeah, we welcome you to attend.
Great.
Be great to have you there and interact with some of the volunteers in the community as we reach out to them.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Staff Sergeant Connolly. Appreciate the presentation, the information. Just a quick clarification on the protesters. Two fairly significant events that have taken place. Obviously, there's implications, the community at large, economic implications as well. But at that level, to your detachment with respect to resources, you referred to a fairly significant number of human resources available to address this. Obviously not all from the local detachment. How does that work in terms of the pool of resources you have access to, but also with respect to budgeting in a local context in terms of the arrangement you have with the local municipalities?
So the decision around bringing in the TAC team members was done in partnership with our Island District headquarters, and the costs associated to that are going to be covered by the province. So it will not be a direct hit to either Sydney or North Saanich. So I was kind of happy to hear that support was there. And difficult decision to make, you know, about arranging for all the resources to be here, and a bit of an undertaking to have all of that happen. But generally we can have those kind of resources in place within 3 hours.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good meeting. Thank you.
So we'll move on to 5B, and this is the VAA report to nominators. I see we've got Charles Lavallo and Jeff Dixon, so you have the floor.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for the opportunity for the airport to come and brief you on our activities for the past year and some of the things that we have planned for 2020. Wendy Everson was actually going to be opening and speaking tonight. She's one of 2 nominees. You mentioned Chuck Lavello. Wendy had a family incident, a death in the family, and she unfortunately has to attend to some issues today and through the week, so she couldn't attend and sends her regrets. Wendy and Chuck both sit on, as well as the board of directors, our planning and development committees and the audit and finance committees. And I'm Jeff Dixon, the president CEO of Victoria Airport Authority. First thing I just opened with, we were really pleased to be recognized as one of BC's top 100 employers. I think that's a testament to just the culture that's been fostered throughout the years, and some of the things we do with respect to a focus on healthy workplace, work-life balance, tuition training, and a number of things that we do for the teams. We're very proud of being recognized. I will say in 2019 it was somewhat of a challenge and a very different year for us. We'd been experiencing record traffic pretty much every year since about 2013. And what we saw in 2019 was over a 6% decline in passengers, and that was largely attributable to probably 3 things. Probably the biggest impact was the grounding of the 737 MAX. You may have followed that throughout the past year. What that does is effectively knocks about 6% of capacity right out of the market, just like that. And Air Canada and WestJet responded quite aggressively, but they have a tendency to put the capacity in certain markets that you might have had targeted for Victoria, and it all of a sudden got moved. We also lost 2 U.S. carriers. United Airlines pulled out after 10 years of service. Nonstop service to San Francisco, and Delta Airlines, who launched Victoria-Seattle service in 2016, suspended operations in September 2019. So when you look at the total seats, we were at 2.8 million seats in 2018, and that number dropped to about 2.55 million. So it's really almost the equivalent of taking 2 hotels, to put it in sort of a different kind of perspective, of taking 2 hotels out of the Victoria marketplace in terms of that kind of capacity drop. When you look at it over the course of 365 days and a few 100,000 seats, very significant. I will say that it did impact our financial position. I'll show you that in a moment. Our balance sheet is very strong. We're one of the only 2 airports in the country that are debt-free, despite having invested over $200 million in the airport since VA was created in 1997. One of the things that we're very proud of is how we diversify our revenue, and our non-aviation revenue is at 69% of our revenue base, the highest in the country, and our operating costs continue to be in the lowest quartile. If you just look quickly, I won't bore you with too many numbers, but total top-line revenue is about the same. Our budgeted number was considerably higher than that, but we landed at $39.2 million. Our expenses increased by $1.7 million, but our overall net income is still pretty robust at $9.2 million on a revenue base of $39.2 million. What that leaves us with, if you add amortization and net income together, that's sort of your free cash flow to invest in capital, which is very much the business model for the airport. 100% of your profit is reinvested in the airport facility. We did, with the downturn as we went into 2020, if you look back at 2018, our capital program was actually $30 million. In 2019, it was $16.5 million. And the total capital program we're directing in 2020 is just $8 million. So you can see a significant reduction, and that's really a word of a cautionary approach, just given that we want to get a sense of how the market's going to level off and will it start to come back. I guess the coronavirus, and I'll talk to that, or I'll maybe answer questions on that later. I mean, that's still to be determined, the kind of impact. We know it's very significant on long-haul international flights, but we're starting to see it manifest itself into people's travel behavior just in general, just out of fear until they have a clear understanding exactly how things might, a vaccine is created or the actual temperatures change in the disease itself. I mean, it hasn't been declared a pandemic yet, but it's certainly, we're monitoring it every day, and we're getting reports from Washington, D.C., from Airport Council International, trying to get as clear an understanding of the implications as possible. The capital program we're looking at here, the basement development program, we're just taking advantage of our Lower Holdrum expansion and building down. We're creating a new integrated operations center. I'll talk about roads and some of these other things come up in later slides, and I'll just walk you through that. This is the Lower Holdrum expansion, where we've effectively taken the capacity. You can see the older building slightly higher and stretched it out by some 60 meters. Very proud of the overall design and layout, and this is going to look after growth for the next probably 15 or 20 years in that particular area. Really focusing on local providers. This is a company, well, I'm sure you're very familiar with it, based on Keating, Mount Newton Crossroad Fresh Cup Roastery. They launched in September, and it's really neat to see how the business is growing for them in the airport. We're going to be bringing in, creating actually the first distillery in an airport in Canada. We're bringing in Victoria Distillers, and we're just working through the final construction plans, but they should be opening in May of this year. Common use terminal equipment, again, it's a bit of an airport technical thing, but it's something that what it does is allow all the proprietary systems for the airlines to plug into a common platform. And what this does, it just creates the flexibility so you don't have dedicated gates and dedicated check-in counters. You can move and utilize your asset much more efficiently. We're one of the few airports of our size that actually doesn't have this system, and we had held off on it just given the cost increases of implementing. I mean, the capital component's about $1.8 million just to purchase the system, and then the ongoing operating costs, which the airlines are paying for, is about $500,000 a year. We're introducing, you're probably, if you've flown through Seattle and Vancouver, you're probably used to automated kiosks where you go up, scan your passport, get your picture taken, and then just sort of breeze through security fairly quickly. We'll be implementing 8 units in our international arrivals hall. We're just fine-tuning the design of the exact placement. They're actually going to be lined up as we've redone it. I'm showing them here. We're going to be moving all 8 along there, and it should increase the processing time, probably reduce it by at least half in terms of increasing the overall throughput in the relatively undersized facility. We'll be re-engineering this year, not actually executing the project, but we need to, as we look and expand the airport and look 5, 10, 15, 20 years ahead of time from now, because first and foremost what you need to do is get the road and the curb frontage all designed for future terminal expansion. And most importantly, our challenge right now is we have a bifurcated parking lot. We just see vehicles continue to grow. Electra Boulevard actually, does this laser work on here or no? No. It doesn't. Yeah, it's the same as ours. Right now you have sort of 2 parking lots, and it's a little more complicated in terms of controlling the flow. You can take the road out right to the west, and then all of a sudden it converts your to a single parking lot. So we're working on the design of that right now for implementation, and we're getting ready. We'll be building a 2-curb system. We're getting the technology in place for tracking the ride-sharing companies if and when they do come. I'm quite certain they'll be here shortly. Don't know if necessarily in 2020, but we'll see. But we're just getting prepared for that, and that has a significant impact, I think, on the overall dynamic of vehicle ridership, whether it's on taxis or people parking or people riding public transit or people riding the airport shuttle. I think it'll be just a change. I think it'll certainly improve connectivity from some of the hotels into the airport itself. The good news, in terms of new services, we now have 6 nonstop flights a week to Mexico. It's a big program. That a couple of new destinations were added this past winter. Swoop is introducing service this summer. They're an ultra-low-cost carrier, a subsidiary of WestJet. They're going to be flying Winnipeg to Victoria between the two markets 5 days a week, starting on April 23rd. Air Canada is going to daily service on Montreal, which is actually a really big deal. And they're not only increasing their frequency, they're upgauging from 150-seat to 200-seat aircraft. So that's a very big lift in the marketplace. And the 767, which is a 300-seat airplane, will be flying in conjunction with a 200-seat aircraft. So the capacity increase on Toronto is staggering. That will be flying this summer in and out of Victoria. I think if we look at some of the markets, I've just highlighted in red the new markets. If I go back to Swoop, one of the things that we find is if they build it, if the route is successful, the Winnipeg services, they'll start to build out in Victoria. So we could see markets like Las Vegas, Phoenix, potentially Hawaii coming back on a nonstop basis. We look at new markets like Hamilton. Ottawa is the largest unserved market actually in Air Canada's network when they look at their O&Ds. Passenger demands. So Saskatoon and Regina, and then I'd like to see United build out a nonstop service into Victoria through the Denver hub, and Los Angeles is a really fast-growing market in Victoria as well. In terms of land development, we have a number of exclusivity agreements in place right now. We hope to see some construction happening over the course of the next 6 to 8 months. We're working through, we're just, I guess the ones that are most imminent are right here and right in here. We're still under exclusivity agreements, so I can't really say the names. I apologize for that. I don't mean to be coy. We're still looking at the intersection, which is zoned for commercial development at Beacon and the Highway. We took a bit of a breather on that after the time and effort that was spent with the rezoning and the project with Omicron, and we sort of took a pause. We're turning our minds back to that site and see what might be a good fit for the community. And then finally, with I forgot to mention that with the expansion of the apron, we had to relocate some viewing areas at the airport. And if you haven't had a chance to see that, we've created a new public viewing area just on the west side of the airport where Hamburger Hill used to be, sort of facing in there. So that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from committee? Councillor O'Keefe?
Chair. Thank you for the report. Going back to the ride-sharing service, and you talked about getting prepared for that. I'm wondering, do the surrounding municipalities, is there anything that we need to do in terms of licensing drivers that are going to and from the airport? I don't know if that's a question for you, for staff, or.
I don't think there's anything the municipality, well, not to my knowledge. We've been working directly with the rideshare companies, and so it's for us, it's a question of if they're going to come in and go out, there'll be a drop-off charge and a pickup charge, and you have to create the technology to be able to track them. So we have a geofence that we'll build for the airport, and then we'll be able to track the vehicles coming in and out.
Okay, so your focus will be mainly on allowing them to pick up there, and then they'll drop off wherever. And I guess I'm just thinking that
Right.
there's always been an issue here for people getting out from Sydney and North Saanich to the airport in the morning. It's, as you know, it's a chronic issue with our local cab companies. And so whether municipalities need to do anything specific to allow them to be picking up in our jurisdictions to go to the airport.
And I honestly don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry. I know it's been a source of frustration for us in terms of the hotels.
Yeah.
And sort of looking to the airport to solve a problem for the hotel to be able to deliver someone to the airport. And, you know, we're very open to the other way around, from the airport being able to deliver to the hotel,
Yeah.
because that's the contract that we deliver. But we have been working with the task force. I think the Wilson's group is actually exploring taking the YYJ shuttle product into some of the hotels. And we've had the yellow cab companies out as well. I would really like to see Sydney Taxi step up. I think they have 5 or 6 vehicles, and they're kind of in the region. And I'm a bit perplexed why they can't meet the demand, because the demand isn't really that high. So
Okay.
for the early morning.
I was also interested about the food trucks. So you ran, was it a pilot this past year?
Yes, yeah.
Where, I don't recall seeing them. Where were they set up?
In the parking lots, just sort of
Oh.
on there. We're trying them on both sides, on
Okay.
the arrivals by the totem poles,
Yeah.
and then on the eastern side of the parking
Yeah,
lot.
and just curious, was there any resistance from the, vendors within
No.
the airport and?
We didn't really ask for permission.
Oh,
We
okay.
just did it. We had the right to do that. And the kind of revenue volume was about $500 a day on that. So it
Okay.
wasn't that, I mean, it was a good number for the trucks, but in terms of the restaurateurs, it wasn't that material for them.
Okay, good. That's good, thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got Councillor Rentoul, then Garn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Dixon, for your presentation. A lot of great things to continue happening at the airport. One thing you didn't touch on, but I want to make sure we do justice to this and express my appreciation for the number of local organizations that you've supported. I know they approach you for financial support and for sponsorship, not only with special events that happen in the community, but also with some organizations that are here long-term and in need of some help. So you've been a great community partner. I would liken that as well to your getting a head start on ride sharing. I think you've acknowledged the challenges that this community is faced with trying to get service early in the morning. And like you, I agree. Ride sharing is inevitable in our market, and I commend you for getting out front on the technology that's going to be needed to put it in play as quickly as possible. 2 questions just around the financials, and I recognize that the report we received had some references to forecast 2019 figures, so perhaps they've altered somewhat. But just out of interest, you referred to declining passenger traffic, and yet concession revenue was expected to be 9.3% ahead of 2018. What do you equate that to?
That was a renegotiated contract primarily with the car rental companies. And so after I think it was a 5 or 6 year contract that expired when it went out for tender, the top 4 bidders for in-airport, their bids were considerably higher, and that's a minimum annual guarantee.
Okay, understood. Thank you. And the other, again, refers to your 2019 forecast figure, but under revenue, rentals, real estate, I was surprised to see a decline there. You acknowledged that the airport's very successful in its sort of non-aviation endeavors, but this looks to report a 7.8% decline over 2018 in rentals, real estate. What's
2
what's behind
things
that?
is that when Omnicron was holding the site, they were paying $10,000 a month.
Okay.
So that was $120,000, and the Cube site, there was still revenue for that, which was $280,000 a year. And that's the site just off Sterling on the north side.
But the site's still occupied?
It's empty.
It is empty now.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. Didn't realize that. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Dixon.
You're welcome.
Question around the environment part, and I was wondering, congratulations on the accreditation given. When they talk about a reduction in carbon footprint per passenger, can you explain what it was before to what it is now, and how they analyze and come up with that data, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, so there's a baseline measure. We actually use it's actually kind of a neat success story, a local Victoria company called Synergy. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Jill Doucette, and we actually worked with her a number of years ago in our environmental management plan, introduced her to the airport carbon accreditation, and her company's one of 2 carbon accreditation airport measurers, if you will, certified in the country. So they come in and look at your various consumption of electricity and, or natural gas, and it sort of measures your overall carbon footprint. And in 2013, we were, I think, 738 tons of CO2. And in 2018, that number went down to, I think, 620. So it was a significant reduction. We actually found in 2019, on an absolute basis, it's gone back up because of the horrific snowstorm that took place in February. So we're still trying to work out a way to get a better metric on that. So I don't know, does that answer your question broadly?
Yeah, sure. I guess the other question I have is, it centers around, you mentioned the Beacon and Pat Bay Highway site that Omicron had held. And you mentioned the commercial aspects of that, and I'm wondering, I've been wondering for a while actually, in terms of our strategic priorities, we really focus on community well-being. And I, as a person who's lived in the community a lot and worked here many years, I've often visualized that as being a community garden spot. Now, I don't know whether that's something you guys might consider adopting and whatever you bring to that site, but I just thought in terms of providing food sustainability, getting seniors out of condos and you know, meeting with people and social isolation, it could do so much to improve our community in that sense. So I wonder what your thoughts would be, something like that.
Yeah, I hadn't really contemplated that for that specific site. I mean, I think from the airport's perspective, we've given, we gave North Saanich effectively Jubilee Park. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
They basically pay us $3 a year for that site. So it was our sort of give to that community. We're very proud of the 9.3 kilometer walking path that we built around the airport for the community. But I hadn't really seen that site for that particular purpose. Yeah, I think there's other sites. I mean, we have talked as we build our sustainability plan. We've hired a new environmental coordinator, and she's looking at things like maybe there's pollination gardens that we can build and develop around the airport, because I've been asking her, well, what about bees and what can we do? And she's so exploring all sorts of things. So I would say stay tuned as we develop our sustainability plan. I think you'll see some quite interesting initiatives coming out.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
No? Seeing none? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on then to item number 6, which are the grants and aids requests. And, yep, Councillor Renton?
Mr. Chair, forgive me if I'm out of order, but I don't know if there'd be an appetite to do 9A in place of 6A, and I only suggest that because I know there's a presentation associated with 9A. I'll leave that to your latitude, obviously.
If you'd like to make a motion to revise the agenda, if committee's agreeable, then we'll do it.
I'll move that we address 9A ahead of 6A.
Okay, that's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, we're on to number 9A, and this is development variance permit number DV 100293, 9335 Webster Place, to reduce the minimum required front yard setback, and we've got a presentation by James Haley Brown. Sir, you have the floor.
So thank you, Mayor and Council. I was mentioned, my name is James Haley Browning. I'm here to present my request to Council to grant a variance for an encroachment of a front entry extension newly added to my home at 9335 Webster Place. The variance requested is due to a small corner of the new front entrance being 4 inches over the town's front setback requirement. Noting the majority of the structure is within this requirement, as can be seen with the included plans here. The total area, with my very, very rough calculations, comes out to be a maximum of 12 square inches. That's over the line. As we can see, I have to zoom in a heck of a lot to see it's just that small corner there. As for my letter I submitted, we contracted to have a front entrance addition and replacement of a failing carport with someone we believe to be a reputable builder, one who is registered with the BC Home Warranty Program. Despite his repeated assurance that the building permit was in process and that he was in compliance with all the building bylaws, it turns out they were not. We then contacted your building department, made them aware of the situation, have stopped all work on the place, basically to remediate the situation. Obtaining this requested variance is one of the necessary first steps to bring this project into compliance. Putting the contractor situation aside, I feel the following reasons also justify the variance request. First and foremost, the area of non-compliance is very minor, as you can see by that small amount there. And most of the project is well behind the required setback. The majority of the house, majority of the house is actually, as you can see, behind the required setback there. And if you look at from the road, it is actually, quite a fair ways back based on the town's setback, which has about 6 feet. We can also see by the before and after picture, there was already a bump out in front, and we just kind of filled it in and brought it forward by apparently a few inches too much, which was not our intention. Optically, the house does appear much further back than other houses in the area, although they are within compliance. Looking at other new builds on our street, we have some large duplexes that have been put in, and optically they do look to be closer to the road than our house does. So in other words, basically the encroachment is not visually effective, but the cost for us to fix this small variance would cause huge financial hardship to my family. Our intent with this new construction was to keep the original 1960s house while updating the exterior consistent with the new style that's being developed in our neighborhood. Also looking at the house that's directly across the street, we did try to mimic the design with our house as well. We've also talked to a number of neighbors in our area. They're very pleased with the changes we've made and have signed a letter of support for our application. Kind of ticked off the properties that we did visit. Some of the ones that we weren't able to see, they're either vacant properties right now, or they're away on vacation, or just weren't home, unfortunately, when we went around to do this. Given that this encroachment is very small and visually inoffensive, given that the overall look of the project is a much improved house, and given the neighborhood support, I do beg council for their approval of my request. I would like to add that it was always my intent to comply with township building requirements. It's evidenced by my prompt voluntary disclosure to work and my sincere efforts to date to fix everything. I would like to thank the council, mayor and council for their time in considering this application. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from committee? Looking around. Councillor Garner?
Not a question so much as a comment. I appreciate the effort you've made to rectify it. I mean, I drove by your property and visually I couldn't tell. I had to go back to my agenda to see what they were even talking about. So I see what you're saying about visually. I would have never known it was 4 inches over, other than the fact that you brought it to light and shows some good character on your part. And I think you've done a fabulous job. It does blend well with what's been done in your neighborhood, and I'll fully support going through with the variance.
Appreciate it.
Councillor Rentoul?
Yeah, I'd like to move the recommendation, if I may, Mr. Chair, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters of 9335 Webster Place be notified regarding development variance permit application number DV 100293 to relax the minimum front yard setback, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
Second. Okay, that's moved and seconded. Discussion? Anyone? Okay. I have a question actually for staff regarding this. I guess it's concerning to have a builder operating in the town of Sydney who's giving this kind of insurance and not taking out building permits. And I note you've carefully not named the business. I trust staff are aware of who the individual is, and is there any action that we take to follow up on something like this? Like license to operate in the town or that sort of thing?
To the chair, often builders might have an intermunicipal business license where they're licensed in the municipality in which they reside, and they can do business in other municipalities. I'm not aware if this individual builder is licensed in the town of Sydney or not. I know that our building officials are looking into that and are looking into where they might be licensed and just passing the word along that this has happened.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you, Chair. I get just building on follow up to your question to staff. So my recollection is that this there was a similar situation, I think it was on Beaufort Road, where construction or renovations continued to take place on a property that where they didn't have the appropriate permits and things. And so I guess I'm getting back to the point about, do we have a process in place to say if these builders come forward in the future to get permits in Sydney that they're not going to be eligible to get building permits? Or is there a financial penalty that we can levy? And if not, is that something we should be looking into?
Through the chair to Councillor O'Keefe, no, we can't not issue a license to someone in the future because they didn't get a license in the past, and our bylaws don't have any provision for kind of penalty fines. The building officials can refuse to issue a license after the fact and instead put a notice on title advising that something was done without the benefit of getting a permit, and that would alert a future property owner to a potential hazard that might be there due to the work possibly not complying with the building code. But no, we can't refuse to issue a building permit to a builder who has not obtained one previously. We can't kind of penalize somebody like that. Does that answer your question?
I guess so, but I guess my question is, why can't we? And so, is it something under we don't have under authority under the Local Government Act, or?
If I can, through the chair, there are probably legal implications associated with it, and before we would even consider something like that, we would want to get legal advice around that. We can look into it for council and get back to council regarding potential options if there are potential ways of doing that in the future. But what I can say is that there are potential legal implications around that, and there could be legislative issues around that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Duncan?
This is, I guess, a question through you, the chair, to staff. 4 inches and a 12 possibly square inch different. When you look at it on the map, it kind of looks like it could essentially be a measurement error, especially on an oddly shaped lot like that. What is the kind of accuracy we have in our lot lines for when people are doing these kind of developments that would, like plus or minus, and then it's going to trigger something? Yeah.
Through the chair to Councillor Duncan, when we receive a survey from a BC land surveyor that shows the distance from property line to foundation, which is where they measure from, they don't measure to the siding materials, they measure to the foundation. We have to take that as being 100% accurate. We don't have any kind of wiggle room on the number. And even though this is slightly over what's permitted, as staff, we don't have any wiggle room with that. The number is the number, and that's how it is.
Okay, thank you. We've got a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, thank you. They'll advertise the variance, and it'll probably be on an agenda a couple of weeks from now. So, moving back then to item number 6, which is the grants and aid. So just as a kind of opening comments for getting into this, at least 3 council members have got a conflict of interest on one or more of these grant applications, and I think it would make sense to get that out of the way at the beginning, awareness of that. So I'll say I believe I've got a conflict of interest on the Sydney Arts and Media Society, which is Radio Sydney, because I'm one of the radio hosts. Councillor Duncan, you have a declaration as well?
Yeah, I used to be on the board of Cycling Without Age Society. I'm no longer on the board, but my face is still on some of their slideshows, so I feel that looks, improper. And the Sydney Guide and Scout Hall Society, I'm a scouter as well. So.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Rento?
Yes, Peninsula Dry Grad Society.
Okay. And with a conflict of interest, we're supposed to declare why.
My son is party to that program as a grade 12 graduating student.
Okay, thank you. And Mayor McNeil Smith?
Thank you. I have a conflict with the Sydney and Peninsula Literary Festival, I benefit from the functions that they, events that they do.
Okay, so we've noted 5 of the requests that a member has got a conflict. Anyone else? Okay, so a suggestion in terms of how we handle this. Generally, if you've got an interest in one of the requests, if we leave it to the very end, you're probably unconsciously leaving some room in the budget so that there is some funding available when your request comes up. The suggestion would be maybe we get those out of the way at the beginning and then deal with the rest of the stuff. So if everyone's okay with that, if you want to start off with the Radio Sydney one, I can vacate the chair. The mayor perhaps could chair that particular item, and I'll come back when you've dealt with it, if that works.
Okay, sure. So we are looking at the line under Recreation and Culture, Sydney Arts and Media Radio, or Media Society Radio, in brackets Radio Sydney. So this is a first-time request. We didn't have a request last year, and the request amount is for $400. Councillor O'Keefe?
I just have a question in terms of process. So if you can remind me how we did this last year, if we do a motion for each particular one to approve them, or whether we're doing a motion to take them off the list. I don't remember how we handled that, or whether we went through it by consensus and then at the end approve them all.
Sure, good question. So with these particular 5 at least, because of members excluding themselves, my suggestion is we make a decision on what we will or will not grant. So as a member of committee, you could do one of 2 things. You could make a motion to any effect, or you could express your view in terms of what you're supportive of or concerned of. We could hear from other members and then have a motion. So I will leave it to members to do one of the 2. Did you wish to?
Okay, well, to start off the discussion, thank you. I would make a motion that we approve a request for $400 for the Sydney Arts and Media Society, Radio Sydney.
Discussion? Councillor Fallot?
Thank you. I'm not in favor of approving it. My concern is it's a specific intent to use it for the production of 4 shows to take the pulse of the town on topical issues. Now, I don't as such have an issue with supporting this community radio station. I am concerned for that particular use. I see it as supporting them to do a pulse, and I don't think that's our place to do so.
Okay, if I could just perhaps respond to that. I certainly see the councillor's point with regards to that. And one of the things I noticed in a number of applications, and of course I don't know the intent of the applicant, but the way our application is worded on that second page is intended use of funds. And quite frankly, for many of these organizations, they are picking something out, either programs or expenses. I mean, one it's computers, one it's replacement of chairs, another one it's something else. And for me, these are all different operating things. They will change from one year to the next. And to suggest that our grant would be dedicated to that particular initiative, or that it wouldn't happen if we didn't grant that, I think for many of these we should consider it that the grant is actually going to general operations. I think just the way our application is that applicants may have said, well, if we identify this, then we're more likely to get it, and I actually feel contrary to that. I really think in many of these cases, and we'll touch on some of them as we go through, that we're actually contributing to the general operations of the group. Councillor Fallot?
So just as a rebuttal, and I appreciate that, and I gave this some thought. It's just that because that's what it says there, and if another group comes along and wants to do the same sort of thing, or that's their mandate to connect and engage with the community, and is asking us for funds. That's why I'm taking this on principle, in other words.
If I could respond, the motion could contain that we grant these monies to go to general operations. But I'll leave it, your points are taken. Councillor Rentoul?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I had a similar concern that's been cited, so I won't speak to that. But if I'm looking at this from a general operations standpoint, from the P&L that's been provided from 2019 at about a $9,000 loss, this $400 is not going to make a difference in that regard. There are other avenues I would expect probably our options to pursue, be it through other varieties of sponsorship or advertising opportunities, etc., that they could perhaps pursue. So while I'm certainly supportive of the volunteer effort, that's essentially volunteer efforts gone into this, I don't think I'm ready to open the door to see us providing grant and aid at this point in time to Radio Sydney. Thank you.
Councillor Duncan?
Look, I guess I take the opposite stance that you do for these, where if it was something that was for a specifically identified item, or in this case program, I would be more likely to provide it rather than them showing me that they're relying on us for operational funding, since we have such a small amount of grants and more and more people every year, although I guess this year we're less than we were last year. It makes me nervous that there might be organizations relying on us for their operational funding. And I would prefer it to be for kind of additional things that was a bit of a stretch goal for them that year. So for this one, that actually fit my criteria, that this was a first-time application, a very small amount for them to kind of try and do maybe perhaps a different type of programming for them. I would have preferred in this case, because I'm not entirely clear if it was because they need different type of equipment or what it is that they need that particular money for. I would have preferred to help out in that way rather than promotional or something. But for that, I'm just on that criteria alone, I would be in favor of them. But I'm, I guess, lukewarm on it for the same reasons Councillor Fallett brought up.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. I'm in favor of it. I look at this as another an opportunity for engagement in the community, another sort of media outlet. You know, here in Sydney, really all we have is the Peninsula News Review print media in terms of opportunities for people to maybe send a letter to the editor to give their view or to get information about what's going on. And sometimes we struggle to get our message out sometimes, or to get different views. So for such a nominal amount, I'm happy to support it, to provide that opportunity.
Any other speakers? I'll call a question. All those in favor of the grant? Opposed? That's a tie, so the motion is defeated. If we could ask for Chair Wainwright to return, please. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you. And I guess we're on to the next conflict of interest. Shall we do the literary festival, and then we'll do the Cycling Without Age and Scouts?
Certainly, I will recuse myself, but just to update you, Chair, we did not approve the grant. You will need to know that just because of the total sums that will be awarded. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Sydney Literary Festival. We gave them 500 last year. They had asked for 1,500. This year, they're only asking for 500.
I'll move 500.
Second.
So that's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Go ahead.
So per the last one, this is one of those ones that looks to me like it's a continuing operating expense. I like that they moderated their expectation based on what they got last year, but it does make me nervous that they will be coming back every year to ask for something. So I was not in favor of this one.
Any further discussion? Okay. I'll just weigh in on that particular point. We have several organizations on our list that have been getting funding from Sydney's grants for a long time, and basically they depend on it for their operational funding. So if we're going to start cutting people off because they depend on it for operational funding, we're going to see some significant hits to some of the ones on the list. Like, I'd say there's probably 6 that fit that category. I don't support that. I certainly would support encouraging them to get on more stable financial footing, but where they've been receiving a grant from the town of Sydney in the same amount for more than 20 years, I don't think it's unreasonable that they've come to depend on it. Councillor Fallon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just further to that, I also note when we received the Airport Authority's report that under their list of community donations, the Lit Fest was up there for $400, and looking through their revenues, they do diversify where they are getting their funding from. I think they are reaching out to the community as for funding. So based on that, I think they're broad enough in where they're going for their funding, and I'm happy to continue supporting them.
I don't think we need Councillor Duncan?
I guess what I was going to say, because I know there's at least 6 who come back year after year, that I'm starting to wonder how many of these should actually then, if we intend to continue supporting them, be moved to line items so that we don't have this request or, this opportunity goes out every year, says we have $15,000 available, but we know every year that several thousand of it, possibly at least half, is actually earmarked for another organization. And we're not actually we don't actually have 15,000 available to give each year. We have maybe less than that, 5,000, 7,500. So I just kind of want to raise that as, if these are things that we don't want to pull the funding on because we've been supporting them for all this time, then maybe we should start earmarking some of these and saying, this has to be moved into a constant arts and culture or economic development earmark fund, so that we know that new organizations can actually start coming forward and know that money would be available.
Can I suggest we might look at that when we get through the list? Councillor O'Keefe?
I'm in support of this, but in regard to Councillor Duncan's point, I think a discussion, and I think we had this discussion last year too, but we never quite got to it, in terms of having a focused discussion about grants in aid and the sorts of things that we should be supporting. Are we going to, continue just because somebody's been there for 20 years? Are we going to continue to do that? You also want to be looking at new things that come in, so I can see some hesitation and, sort of grandfathering organizations over a long period of time. And then there's so many other things to consider, whether we should be continuing to do it for 20 years or we should do it for 5 years and then expect them to become self-sufficient. And I think it's going to start to become more of an issue in the future with what we've heard from other organizations that have come forward with funding, say Artsy, for example, who needed additional funding from us, not through grants and aid, but in other processes, where what we hear is that there's less people having the time to volunteer. You know, it's mainly a senior population. So I guess what I'm saying is, good idea to have a discussion at sometime in the future.
So I'll just remind the committee, we've got a motion in front of us, which is about the Literary Festival, and good discussion about line items and policy on how we do things. Maybe at the end of going through all the grant applications, we can have that discussion. Okay, so anything further on the motion to approve the Literary Festival request? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Could we bring the mayor back? Next, we're going to do Councillor Duncan's, the Cycling Without Age and the Scout Hall Society. And Councillor Duncan's just recused herself. The Literary Festival request for 500 was approved. Okay, so now we're going to turn to the Cycling Without Age Society. They requested 2,000 last year. We gave them 1,000 last year. This year they're requesting 2,100. Do anyone wish to make a motion, Mayor?
Just before a motion, I'd just like to make a comment, and I just want to flip back to their application. So it is helpful, or staff has provided, Mr. Hissik's provided the different categories here: recreation and culture, economic development, social services. But the Cycling Without Age, when I read the objectives mandate of the organization, to provide services to less able residents of all ages to help end social isolation, nurture intergenerational relationships, and promote community active citizenship. I consider that more of a social service rather than, I know we might think of it as recreation because cycling is involved, but really it's not about the recreation, it's about the what it provides to the riders. So I would like to consider it in the light of it being providing that service in the community versus just recreation.
Okay. Does anyone want to propose a motion about an amount to support or deny?
Sure,
Councillor Rintoul?
I'll move that we support the same amount of 2019 at $1,000.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Okay, it's seconded. Discussion. Mayor McNeil Smith?
Another lens that I've kind of applied this year, after considering how we proceeded last year and previous on council, serving on council, is the thought: we're not making a decision on that tonight, or we're not asked to make a decision on that. We could, but do we foresee ourselves? This is a nonprofit organization, a small nonprofit organization. When you look at their financials and you look at the nature of their operation, you could see them requesting this level of grant well into the future. Do we see ourselves continuing to fund on an annual basis what I would consider general operations? And I realize they've allocated that it goes to, it is going to a particular use, but to my comment earlier, I think we need to, to view it as going into operations. So I see some smiles, I don't know.
So,
if there was a recent discussion on that point.
Exactly.
But I think we really need to, I really think we need to consider it. And I think there are some organizations on this list, and I won't necessarily name them now, that do deserve, because of where they are in the community, what their financial supports are or aren't, that we do. And for, quite frankly, those, whether we do it this evening or we do it through next year's budget deliberations, is as previous councils did and took the museum and Beacon Community Services and some others and made them line items.
if I could just expedite
I'm
it.
going on to.
The suggestion was at the end of working through all the grants, that we have that discussion about whether we want to make some of these line items. And there was another suggestion about some general policy of how we deal with things. But right now, we've got a particular motion, and that's what we should be dealing with. So when we get through it all, then the line item discussion would be appropriate.
Okay, my only comment is I am willing to support it this year until we have that perhaps fuller discussion. But my preference, just because of where I would like to see balance of funds go, would be to be at a level of 750 rather than 1,000, but the motion is on the floor.
Okay. Councillor Garnet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support the motion of $1,000. I think this hits a lot of our ideas of what we want in our community: active transportation, inclusivity, and accessibility. Ticks a lot of boxes for me. And having watched the promotional video before it came to Sydney and seeing the impact it's having here on residents, it's something I can fully be behind, because I think it's just doing great work in our community and providing a great social benefit, as you said, social services, and I think it's just fabulous. So I support the motion. Thank you.
Okay. Do we need to have further discussion? Should I just call the question? Okay. All in favor of 1,000? Opposed? Okay, that's carried. Now we're going to move on to the Sydney Guide and Scout Hall Society. And they asked for 1,000 last year. We gave them 500. This year they're asking for 1,000. So, go ahead.
I would like to make a resolution to actually provide the funding at the level that's requested of $1,000. And if I can flip, or perhaps I can recall their application. The application is very clear in terms of what the expenses are. I believe it's $9,000. They do have funding from other organizations, and I think it's a worthwhile organization. It is an organization I would support long term. With funding and welcome the input from others.
Okay, so we've got a motion for support at 1,000. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Seconded. Okay, discussion. Councillor O'Keefe?
Sorry, just a question, maybe through you to staff. Do they own that building, and do we give them a tax breaks on that as well? Permissive tax exemption?
I believe their application said that the building was left to the Scouts in trust, so they would own it.
Okay, and so we would give them, I presume we give them a permissive tax exemption?
That's right, they do benefit from one.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rento?
Yeah, thank you. I had envisioned a lesser amount, but I concur with the mayor's comments, and so I'll support the motion. I note from the financials that are provided that this is just money in, money out. They're not in a position to see from their funding initiatives themselves in a net income position. So I'm happy to support the motion on the floor.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, so the motion is to approve 1,000. All in favor? Opposed? One opposed? That's carried. And can we bring Councillor Duncan back? Right. Okay, so we're going to move on to the Peninsula Dry Grad Society, and Councillor Rentoul has recused himself. And just for the benefit of Councillor Duncan, we approved 1,000 for Cycling Without Age and 1,000 for the Guide and Scout Hall Society. Okay, so for Dry Grad, they asked for 1,500 last year. We gave them 1,000. They asked for 1,500 this year. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move that we apportion $1,000.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Discussion? Go ahead.
Thank you. Again, I won't be supporting this motion. I'm actually in favor of granting them the request of $1,500. I think it's a tremendous organization, a bit of tremendous benefit to our community for graduating high school students. The other two municipalities have participated in the past. to a level of $1,500. We don't know necessarily whether they'll do that this year, but I would be supportive of granting the requested amount.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the motion to approve 1,000. All in favor? Okay, opposed? Okay, that's 4-2, that's carried at 1,000. And can we get Councillor Rintoul back in? Councillor Rintoul, for your benefit, we approved 1,000 for the Dry Grad Society.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, committee, so now we get to deal with all the ones that are remaining. And in terms of perhaps facilitating the discussion, I note that there are many of the requests that we approved a level of $500 for last year, and they're asking for $500 this year. And I'm wondering if there might be any appetite to deal with those requests as a block. Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair, and I do appreciate the approach. I would like to draw attention to ORCA under social services.
Okay.
And the reason for going to that is last year we granted $2,000. We also informed them that the town funding would be phased out over time. We didn't stipulate exactly that time period or the stepping down, if you will. But they've, in the request this year, asked for $3,000, even though we made that communication. But the reason I bring it now is because it is a significant amount out of the 15, and if we make that decision, it may provide room or otherwise. And my concern, if we turn to the financials, and that will take me a moment, or I think I remember them, is that they had $166,000 in revenue, and they had $66,000 in expenses. And so they had net income of $100,000. And in the other documentation associated with the application, we can gain no appreciation of what that situation is. So I'm without the benefit of that, I'm not supportive of granting any amount to the organization this year and phasing it out effective this year.
So
Second.
Okay, so that was moved and seconded. Councillor Garner?
Although I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree to some extent, I have a problem with the fact that we've said we're going to phase it out. So if we had planned to stop the funding, we should have said so last year. So I think by saying that you're phasing it out, you're saying to them last year we're going to phase it out. That indicates that it's going to be not next year. So I was comfortable with dropping it down to 500 and then saying next year that's it. Like saying this is the last 500. Just the way that's phrased, I'm not comfortable with that. That's
okay. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. I concur with the mayor's comments. When you look at the financial statements, there's not, to me, a demonstrated need. Whether we say phased or not, I don't think, phased can be a year, it could be 5 years, but I think it was clear that, we're not going to continue to support this. And for a number of reasons, when I look at the list of groups here, many of them are solely supported by volunteers. Like I look at the Aviation Museum, for example, or many of these, they're completely dependent on volunteer manpower. And this organization, our money is going towards, they have to pay salaries for dentists and things. But I guess I think there's more of a demonstrated need with other organizations here. So I have no problem just crossing them off the list this year.
Okay, Councillor Fallon?
Thank you. And I think those are fair comments, Councillor O'Keefe. And I also understand what my neighbor is saying. I think they've applied for a grant. With all the rest of it, there is no guarantee that they're going to get the funds. And they are ahead of the game. So if we don't fund them this year, it's not going to be the end of the day.
Okay. I am sort of detecting that further discussion is not likely to change the outcome. And I was just going to call the question, unless somebody.
No, well, sorry, Chair, it is a comment I would like to make, because I intended to preface my remarks, is that I think I speak for council in that we value the service that this organization provides to the community. It's unique, it was innovative when it was created, it fills a gap, and so I just want to state that we're certainly appreciative, but we are looking this in terms of the criteria and other requests.
Okay. I'll call the question. All in favor? And this is of rejecting the application. So all in favor? Opposed? One opposed, and that's denied. Okay. Following the mayor's suggestion, I think I will then turn to one of the next large items, and this one would be the Saanich Marine Rescue Society. Last year they asked for $5,000. This year, and we gave them $1,900. This year they're asking for $5,000. Do we want to deal with it now, or wait? Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you. So this is under social services, and I appreciate that social services is certainly broad, but I see marine rescue as an emergency service, and I actually have a question through the chair to staff and perhaps our fire chief, in that certainly we provide emergency protective services through the department that involves much more than just fire protection. And this organization, speaks to providing its service in the waters of the Saanich Peninsula. What is the connection between the emergency services that the town provides and a volunteer organization such as this?
Through the chair to the mayor, what they provide is they're an adjunct service that supports the Canadian Coast Guard that's based out of Ganges. So they're basically an interim measure that provides rescue services until we could get a Coast Guard cutter out of Ganges Harbor. So that's what they provide, and we train with them periodically, sometimes quarterly, depending. So they provide that service, not just to the town of Sydney, but to the peninsula as well.
Thank you for the answer, and I also meant to ask about the relationship with Coast Guard, and you've answered that as well. So considering that they've consistently asked for higher amounts than we've granted, and where did they disappear to here? And so we did grant $1,900. Now, there are some decisions that have been made, and I don't really know where the balance is, but I did want to increase it from $1,900, and I'm not prepared to go to the $5,000 because that's 1/3 of our total budget, but I think this is an important service in our community. We might expect, a senior level of government to be picking up the cost of this emergency service, but it does fill a gap, as we've heard, and so I would be supportive of $2,000, unless there was another calculation.
So, so we've got a motion for 2,000.
Second.
And seconded. My suggestion would be that we can come back at the end of this if we find we have some money left over and increase something if we feel appropriate. So this 2,000 motion, or motion to approve 2,000, may not be the end of it, but it'll guarantee at least that much.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you, Chair. I'm in support of this motion. I agree, it's not a social service. This organization, I've come to realize, provides a number of different benefits. They're the people who are out there at the Sleg boat thing on Canada Day, so that they're assisting with that. They're also on hand during the big boat festival that takes place here in May. They're the ones, I believe, that are responsible for the life jackets that are available on the beach there. So I think aside from emergency services, they're also helping, contributing to economic development in terms of supporting that boat show and our beaches and that sort of thing. So I'm happy to support the motion.
Okay. Anyone further? Councillor Duncan?
this isn't necessarily, I don't think, arguing for or against, but again, this is another one of those ones where if we're talking about an emergency service that we're needing to fund from a grant and aid every year, and that we're concerned about not granting it because then we won't have an aspect of emergency services, that's worrying to me. I think if they are similar in some ways to, like, say, like first St. John's Ambulance, where, you know, when you have a public event, they're the ones who always supply your medic teams, and St. John's Ambulance, I believe, earns their money through for their teaching and for fees for when they do some larger events. And so I would have to hope that perhaps this organization will begin looking at alternative streams of revenue to ensure that they don't have to come for grant and aid that could be pulled one day and then leave us short of an emergency service.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor for 2,000. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, so now I'd suggest we look at Peninsula Streams core operations. Last year they asked for 5,000. We gave them 1,000. This year they're asking for 5,000. What's the committee's appetite? Mayor?
Thank you. Again, in reviewing the application, I think Peninsula Streams has provided benefits to the watershed and waters of the shore, you know, for a substantial period of time. The grants from North Saanich, Central Saanich, and Saanich have been significant over the years. Again, we don't know precisely what they will be this year, but they've been approximately a magnitude higher than what we've committed. And again, they've requested $5,000. We cannot afford 1/3 of our grants and aid to that. But I would like to see that perhaps gradually step up over years, depending on how our process goes. And so I would make a recommendation of $1,500.
Second. Okay, that's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councillor O'Keefe and Rintoul?
Yeah, so I just wanted some clarification. So when we're saying 1,500, is that a total of 1,500 for the two programs, or is it 1,500 for core operations and then we're going to consider school programs separate?
My motion was to just core operations.
Okay.
The other point, unless you want to continue.
No, that's fine.
The other point I want to make is when I did mention the magnitude higher of funding from the other municipalities, geographically we are much smaller than North Saanich and Central Saanich and Saanich. So I'm not suggesting just because we're one of 4 municipalities we should be, you know, contributing 25%. But I do think that step up reflects that consideration as well.
Okay, Councillor Rintoul?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the amount that's been suggested, Mr. Chair, and in part because we don't have 2019 financials here. We've got 2018, but 2018 shows a modest net income, and so I'm assuming if the scenario were much different, we would have heard from them with specific concerns about 2019 and how it was addressed. So I'll support the motion.
Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. So then we've got the Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission asking for 5,000. They asked for 5,000 in 2019. They were given 1,000. I see the notes that 500 is a line item, and they got 500 from our Economic Development Fund last year. Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, clarification question through the Chair to staff. Sorry, can you explain line item? It was a 1-year grant we gave last year?
Several years ago, Council decided to make a 500 grant to this organization a line item, but they keep applying for more regardless of that fact. And last year, Council decided to give them 500 from the ED fund to bring it to 1,000.
So just for clarity, if we denied the application tonight, they'd still get 500 from the line item? Okay, thank you. So Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to continue, and I appreciate that they've applied under grants and aid, but given that they're a line item in the budget, given that there are other organizations, whether it be the aquarium or the museum, or that come forward during budget deliberations that are line items and ask for increased amounts, I would think it would be more appropriate, and we can't do that this year, we've approved our budget, but in future, I think it would be more appropriate if for that line item, that the request actually not come through grant and aid, that we consider it through the normal budget process. However, we do have what we have before us tonight, and again, I'm trying to flip back and forth between the applications. The grants provided by the other municipalities in the CRD, I can't speak if all of them are supporting it, but I know a large number of them are, and I know the combined grants from the municipalities are a significant portion of their revenue, 15-20%, something of that magnitude, and they are an economic generator. I mean, with the activity that they produce, they have had locations in Sydney on multiple occasions. And I think that's been to the benefit of the community at large, particularly when you see the cruise. They love Sydney because they have facilities such as parking at Mary Winspear to accommodate, the large people or the large employee force that they engage. So again, I would like to step through grants and aid this year because that's our only option. I would like to step it up and make a sorry.
If I could. I guess question to staff. Didn't we allocate $5,000 in the Economic Development Fund for whatever came up? So there is the option of tapping into that as opposed to the grants and aid. I'm simply mentioning that what was done last year is an option.
So I would make the motion that we, it's currently 500. So I would make a motion that we grant another $1,000 from the Economic Development Fund.
Okay.
Another 1,000 on top of the 500?
Mm-hmm.
So that
So put the total for a year as a line item, and that'd be considered a line item as well.
So there's a motion for nothing from the grants and aid and 1,000 from the Economic Development Fund unallocated. And that's a motion, and I need a seconder. Okay, it's seconded. Discussion, Councillor Rentoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So while I concur that I'm keen to see the type of support that we provided last year, a little concerned about following that format again and coming out of the Economic Development Fund. It starts to feel like some of the concerns we discussed earlier is, should this item be a line item? Should this item be coming from the Economic Development Fund, which, we essentially eliminated or reduced significantly, with an aim to try and address having a pool of funds with no real defined purpose. So, while I'm quite comfortable with, an additional $500 or the $1,000 that the mayor has suggested, I'm less inclined to support it coming from the Economic Development Fund. So I'll leave my comments there.
Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Chair. I, on the same page with Councillor Wintoul, and I agree with the mayor's comments on the value that the film industry brings to our town. But I'd like to leave that $5,000 intact. We really have some work to do, I think, in terms of developing an economic strategy for the town. And so, I mean, 5,000 I think is a pittance to have left in that fund in the first place. So I prefer to leave it where it is. So I won't support the particular motion, but if we took it out of grants and aids, I would be more inclined.
Okay, further discussion? Seeing no one? Okay. I'll just comment from my own perspective. I'd be prepared to see them get $1,000 total. I'm just in terms of the rest of the grants that are outstanding and how much money we've got left. I'm not comfortable giving them that much of what's remaining.
But as the motion stands, it's not coming out of grants and aid?
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yep. Further discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. This is to approve $1,000 coming out of the Economic Development Fund. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that's defeated. Shall we try a different motion?
I'll move $500 from grants and aid to the Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission.
Okay, that's moved and seconded. Discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried, 4-3. So that's $500 from the grant and aid. Okay, another large one is the Sydney Folk and Fiddle Festival Society. They asked for $5,000 last year. We gave them $1,000. This year they're asking for $4,000, $2,000 as a grant and $2,000 as a loan. But $4,000 is $4,000 coming out of the grant and aid. So is there any, someone like to start us off with a motion?
I'll make a motion for $1,000 for a grant.
Okay, is there a seconder?
I'll second that.
Okay, that's seconded by Councillor O'Keefe. Discussion. Mayor Neil-Smith?
Thank you. I support the motion. I don't believe the municipality, the town, should be engaged in loans to community organizations. So I'm just opposed to that that aspect of the request, but do support the $1,000 grant this year.
Okay. Anyone further? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So that's 1,000.
Mr. Chair, can we get a subtotal here where we're at, please?
Staff?
There are $6,500 remaining.
6,500 remaining. Okay. And just for the benefit of the public or whoever's watching, we have $44,700 worth of requests, total of 15,000 available, and we've dealt with 9 of the requests, and over half the money's gone. So, Mayor McNeil-Smith.
I would like to move that the request from Wounded Warriors Canada be denied.
Second.
Okay, that's moved and seconded. Any discussion? And I think I'll preface this. We recognize that all of these applications are worthwhile causes, but as I just mentioned, we don't have enough money to fund more than a third of them, so we have to say no to some of them. Or we could give them each like $1, but that would be really quite disrespectful. Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Yeah, it's a national initiative. It's certainly very important, but their approach, as they stated in the report, is to go to all municipalities on Vancouver Island and ask for $2,000. And just in terms of what the need is, they're appreciating where the need is and how we, this local community would be supporting is challenging to appreciate.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of denying the application? Opposed? One opposed? That's carried, so that one's denied. Does anyone else want to jump in with any particular ones? There are a few that have applied in the past, been turned down in the past. Councillor Fallett?
I would move that the Mount Newton Center Society is denied.
Second.
Okay, that's moved and seconded. Any discussion on that one? Call the question. All in favor?
Oh, sorry, I think we had Councillor Rintoul.
Councillor Rintoul?
Yeah, thank you. I know that at least during my tenure in council, Mount Newton Society has not, Mount Newton Center Society has not made application previously. Without pulling it out quickly, I recollect there's fair representation on their membership from Sydney, as I recall. And that the work they do, I think, to certainly a sector of the population is of real value and interest, particularly to those in advanced age and needing care and assistance. And so I was more inclined to see us support the Mount Newton Center to the tune of $500. But I'd be keen to hear from my colleagues around declining their application. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fallon?
Thank you. It's, again, this is one of those organizations that it's not a reflection of their value or their contribution or the need. It's making a choice of what we can support and what we can't. And I think for me, the simple one is simply they're located in central Saanich, they're not located in Sydney, and that's probably as complex as the reasoning goes.
Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you. Yes, a certainly worthwhile organization. This is their 41st year of operation on the peninsula, providing support for independent living for seniors, very important in our community and on the peninsula community. But I note that they didn't complete the portion of the application in terms of requests from other municipalities. And in terms of providing supports for seniors for independent living, while a very worthwhile cause, there are many organizations, perhaps not on the scale or size of Mount Newton, although Beacon Services would be the largest, perhaps the largest, with many organizations providing various services to support seniors in our community. This is a new is a new stream, if you will, and I would have a challenge if we started to see multiple applicants for this aspect of support for seniors in our community. So I support at this time denying the application. The other thing I want to note is they did have $573,000 in donations last year, in cash donations. So they have an effective organization in terms of raising money. That isn't to say that they could that the monies that we would grant wouldn't go to a worthwhile cause. That 573 was, I think, a couple of $100,000 higher than usual, but still, in previous years, it's been several $100,000. They may have had a one-time a donation last year, but thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. And I'll just add to that, in looking at their financial statements, there doesn't seem to, I don't see a demonstrated financial need. They get significant funding from the BC Ministry of Health, or I think it was. So I don't think that there's that need that some of these other organizations have.
Anybody further? I'll call the question then on denying the application. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that's carried. That one's denied. Can I suggest that we consider the BC Aviation Museum Society's request? They asked for $8,000 last year. We denied it. This year they're asking for $500. Councillor O'Keefe?
I would like to move that we provide $500 to the BC Aviation Museum Society.
Okay, that's moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing no one? Councillor O'Keefe?
Well, I guess if I got the inkling that you were all going to support it, I won't say anything. But I think, they're a good attraction to our community, so they contribute to economic development. They're well supported by volunteers. And when I look at the amount that we provide to the museum here and to Shaw Center, other attractions, $500 is really not a significant amount, I think, for an attraction to this area that draws in a lot of people and provides a good benefit to our community. So I think $500 is quite a pittance, I'll say again.
Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I'm supportive of this, and I think we perhaps need a larger conversation at some point towards the end, as was previously discussed, about this becoming a line item. I mean, we do have the Sydney Museum and Archives that is a line item and receives substantial support, but that's justified in particular because they are curating, or they are responsible for the artifacts that the town of Sydney owns, which are quite substantial. However, the nature of the BC Aviation Museum is they have artifacts. They have a long list of, even longer than I imagined, of aircraft. And I think that's important, particularly for the history of the airport in our community. since the start of the Second War as a training base, and so I am supportive of it. They are a fairly strong organization financially, but again, I would actually be supportive for the reasons that we line item the Sydney Museum. I would prefer to line item, particularly since it's under economic development, that the $500 come from the Economic Development Fund. Not going to suggest an amendment or we go there. I'm willing to support the motion on the floor, but I think there's a more of a conversation to have later.
Anyone further? Okay, I'll speak up. Worthwhile organization. I recognize that they do attract people to the area, and there are a lot of Sydney volunteers involved. Looking at the number of requests that are left on the list and the amount of money that we have left unallocated, and I don't see it spreading around very effectively. And there are some organizations here that basically are dependent on this. So I'm finding giving BC Aviation Museum $500 actually quite challenging, and I won't support it because I think it's going to make me say no to something else further down the list that I would prefer to see get that 500. I would be fine with tabling it till the end and see if we've got any money left over, but I'm not okay with giving away $500 to them now.
I'm moved that we table it to the end of the discussion.
It's a motion to table. We need a seconder for that. Seconded. Discussion on the merits of tabling. Seeing none, call the question on the tabling motion. All in favor of tabling? Opposed? That's carried. So we'll table that to the end of the discussion. How about Sydney Concert Society? They asked for $5,000 last year. We gave them $1,500. They were formerly eligible for CRD Arts funding. They've asked for $3,000 this year. Would someone like to make a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to bring this one up. I have circulated an email that I received from an individual on the board at Sydney Concert or Classical Orchestra, and they are struggling right now with volunteers and funding, and they said in their email that if they weren't able to put on events that they would reimburse us the funds, which is appropriate and great. The only thing is that would take those funds out of the stream to send to another organization that is going to be operating. So I would make the motion that we deny their application and not give them any money this year.
Second. Okay, that's moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor Rintoul?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think I concur. Wasn't really where I came in thinking I would end up, but I'm concerned, without financial statements, without a budget having been provided, and the type of feedback that you shared with council around their plans for this year, it sounds like they need to regroup and perhaps reapproach. So I'll support the motion.
Okay. Further discussion? Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I won't be supporting the motion. I think this is this organization is really is attached to the community, has a large following, and while I appreciate that if they give the money back, we wouldn't be re-granting it this year. I think we need to have some optimism or support to see them continue. If we deny it, I think it actually perhaps actually leads to their challenges even more so. So I don't support increasing it to $3,000, but subject to us having a future discussion on the arts, which probably won't take effect until the next period. I would like to continue supporting them.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you, Chair. I support denying the funds. A few reasons. I mean, most of these organizations have got a demonstrated following of volunteers willing to step up and to serve the organization. And while it's unfortunate that this organization doesn't have enough people to sit on their board, they're struggling to make a go of it, I think, you know, at some point, the community has to step up. And so for me, when I'm looking at whether to grant funds to an organization, it says something to me that the community isn't willing to step up and support that organization. If they can't get board members, if they're not getting the attendance that they need, if they're struggling financially because they can't get donations. So I'm not too comfortable supporting an organization that doesn't appear to be viable at this time. If they come back, they've got a full board in place, they've got volunteers who are willing to step up and do fundraising and that sort of thing, then I'd be more inclined to support them, but not at this time for those reasons.
Okay, further discussion? Around, seeing none. I appreciate the concern. Certainly the society is having some challenges and they're not certain they're going to be able to put on concerts, although they have in the past and they've been quite well received. If we don't grant them the money, that would seem like that will confirm that there are not going to be any concerts. If we give them, if we make some money available to them, something might happen. And obviously they're saying if the concerts don't happen, they'll give us some money back. But we could give them the same as last year with you know, a clear message that if they aren't able to put on concerts this year and give the money back, we are going to look at them much harder in the next year. That you know, we can't repeat that. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. So so this is a Sydney Orchestra, not the Sydney Concert Band. Is that correct? They're two separate organizations, I believe. There's a Sydney Orchestra, and which this is the Sydney Concert Society.
Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Yeah, so they're under the society, how they registered the organization is they're the Sydney Concert Society. However, they manage the Sydney Classical Orchestra.
Okay.
Which states in the application.
Right, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that. And I guess so what I'd add to the conversation is, in terms of musical groups, we do have the Sydney Concert Band as well, who is out there providing concert to the community. And I don't think that we've seen ever a request from them. So I guess I'm throwing it out there that there's a community group that's providing concerts to the community, and they're able to make a go of it without any funding from us. So if this group were to fail, that would be unfortunate, but there's other organizations out there to provide that sort of service to the community.
Councillor Garnett, then Councillor Fallon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I struggle with, I was fine with providing funding coming in, but having seen the email late in the day, I struggle with providing funding with the possibility of having it refunded when there are other organizations that are worthy that need the money now. So I would support the motion.
Okay, Councillor Fallon?
Thank you. I'm really sad. I had a good conversation with Mr. Perry earlier in the year and talked about the struggles they were going through and the challenges with both audiences and getting boards, and you know, as he states, they're looking for a treasurer, and that's probably in part why they weren't able to provide their finances. I would love to say let's give them some money and give them a chance to do something, but I also look at the other organizations that are requiring and asking for funds, and I think perhaps it's better we do it this way and say no that, and help somebody else at this point. Thank you.
Councillor Duncan?
Thank you. Councillor Phillip, from my memory, and I should have printed it out, they're missing both the president, I believe, and the treasurer. Perhaps you can confirm.
Well, sorry, sorry, I don't see it. They're looking, especially a president and a treasurer, yes.
So that's what concerns me, because I know for Sydney Preschool that I'm the president of. If we lack 4 board members, the president and treasurer being 2 of those 4, we cannot actually run our society under the Societies Act. We must actually begin the process of, now I don't know how much leeway they would give us to do this, and I'd have to look into that if it ever happens, to actually, start dissolving it. So I'm worried about giving money to an organization that may not actually be able to technically, legally continue running over the next little while until they fill those positions. So if they come back next year with those positions filled and that therefore are confirmed that they continue as a society, then it would be possibly happy to help them start getting back on their feet again. But I don't want to give money to a society they might have to dissolve.
So I think we've had a good discussion. We've got a motion on the floor to deny the application. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that's carried. So that one's denied. Okay, so I'm just going to start at the top and work through the ones we haven't done yet. So the first one will be Geronimo Canoe Club, and we did give them $500 last year, although they didn't make an application at grants and aid time. This time they're asking for $2,500. And Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Just before a motion is put on the floor, if, question through you to staff, if we could have a new subtotal, please.
It remains at 6,500.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm looking for a motion on the Geronimo Canoe Club. Councillor O'Keefe?
I'd put forward a motion to award $1,000 to Geronimo Canoe Club out of grants and aid.
Okay, that's moved and seconded. Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you. Again, a question through to staff. Mr. Hisik, could you tell us what the, or are you able to tell us what the balance of requests are on the remaining applications we haven't motioned on?
Not including the Geronimo Canoe Club, it's 7,700.
Thank you.
I'm coming up with a bigger number than that.
Sorry, 8,200 with the tabled one.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, looking for a motion on the Geronimo Canoe Club?
I gave you-
sorry,
yep.
that's 1,000. Yeah, so discussion on that.
Was there a second? Oh, yeah.
Yes. Seeing no discussion? Okay, Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Yeah, I'm more comfortable leaving it at, given the balance of requests and what we've given in the past to remaining at 500, so I won't support the motion for 1,000.
Councillor Rinto?
I think I'll concur with that because I'm just, I'm reviewing again the application and the supporting material and it's not clear to me around the funding, but also I notice, I'm not sure, we provided $500 in support in May. I don't recollect if that was for this same August 3rd and 4th festival that's referred to here, but we're not noted as having sponsored that event in the copy of the program that's here. So I'm just I'm having trouble piecing everything together with this one. I think I'd be more comfortable keeping it last year's level of $500. Thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. When I look at this one, I guess it's the only one that I see that gives us any opportunity to provide support to our local First Nations. So out of the, however many, there's several dozen lists of things here. I think this is the only request from a First Nations organization. And I was at a reconciliation workshop on the weekend, and we talked a lot about how local governments can support First Nations and ways to start building relationships and providing support for some of their activities and for their community. And so that's why I'm inclined to support the motion.
Councillor Garnet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I concur with that, and just by my recollection, Councillor Rintoul, I do believe it was for that race last year, the 500. That's what I remember the presentation being for, or the request that came to us. I don't know whether it's in the little pamphlet, but yeah, I think Councillor O'Keefe makes some excellent points, and that's kind of along the lines I was thinking. That is the only request in there, and it's in terms of reconciliation, I think shows a good step. So thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, I'll just say I'm would be happier supporting 500, but I'll call the question on approving 1,000. All in favor?
3.
Okay, that's 4 in favor. Opposed? So that carries at 1,000. Okay, Peninsula Figure Skating Club. They asked for 500 in 2019. They got 500 in 2019. They're asking for 500 now. Councillor Rintoul?
I guess I'll just speak in general to sporting organizations applying for grant and aid funding. They also, at least in this case, made reference to gaming grant funding. I noted that, which they'd been successful in previous years, appears to be about $49,000 essentially in the bank as of, this is from their January 22nd meeting. Completely supportive of municipalities having a role in providing sporting opportunities for kids, but is that through facilities versus direct cash sponsorships? I guess that's the question I have. I expect this group, like Piranhas, for example, have been funded long-term at around this level, but I'm not as comfortable seeing this ask, come before municipal council versus, for example, the facility, perhaps the Recreation Commission. So I'm quite willing to entertain a discussion around removing them from the list.
So was that a motion to deny the application?
Sure. So moved.
I'll second that.
So that's moved and seconded. Discussion? Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, I'll just concur with Councillor Rintoul's comments. I also looked at the bank balance of almost 50,000 sitting there, and so they seem to be fairly good financial situation. So
Thank you. Anyone have anything different to add? Seeing none, call the question on denying the request. All in favor? Opposed? 1 opposed. So that one's denied. Okay, the Santa Peninsula Piranha Swim Club. Again, same thing. They asked for 1,000 in 2019, got 500. They're asking for 500 this time. Councillor Duncan?
I'll make a motion to deny. This was under my rationale that, again, while they ask every year, this appears to be something that goes towards their operational, and having to access, having to go to the town every year to get operational funding was something I would prefer to be seen done through the Recreation Commission if that's something that needs to be done to support our local teams. So.
Okay, so that's a motion to deny. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Okay, that's seconded. Discussion? So seeing none, I'll just comment that it is operational, but the pool time is a pretty expensive item for them. And they have been receiving grants from the town of Sydney since the very first year I was elected on council. So they will be significantly challenged in finding the money if we say no after 20-some years. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. In looking at their financial statements, I don't see that $500 is gonna significantly challenge them. So, the revenues that they get from, other sources, I don't think that it doesn't appear from what they've provided that $500 is going to have a significant impact. So I'm happy to take it off the menu.
Okay, further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on denying the application. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, next one, Saanich Peninsula Pipe Band. They asked for 1,000 in 2019, we gave them 500, they're asking for 1,000 again.
I'll move 1,000.
Okay, do I have a seconder?
Second.
Okay, so that's moved and seconded. Discussion? Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually in favor of leaving it at $500, and my rationale is when I look at Saanich Peninsula Folk and Fiddle Festival Society and the number of engagements, concerts, and so on that they do in the community versus the size of the Saanich Peninsula Pipe Band organization and their concerts, I think it's in a better proportion as 500 rather than 1,000 as. So I won't be supporting the 1,000.
Okay, Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you, Chair. I concur with the mayor's comments. I was thinking more in line of 500. I appreciate the support they provide in the community, Remembrance Day parade and that sort of thing, but I agree that I'm more in line with $500 is a more reasonable amount in my view.
Okay, further discussion? Okay, I'll call the question on 1,000. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, would someone like to make a motion for a different amount?
I'll move that we approve $500 to the Saanich Peninsula Pipe Band.
Second.
That's moved and seconded. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So 500 for them. And if I'm tracking this correctly, we've got 5,000 still? Okay. So now, next one on the list would be the Crisis Intervention and Public Information Society. They asked for 600 last year, we gave them 600. This year they're asking for 700.
I'll move 700.
Okay, that's moved. And do I have a seconder? And seconded by Councillor Rintoul. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That one's carried at 700. Okay, then we're on to Peninsula Stream School Programs. They asked for 1,000 last year, we gave them 500, they're asking for 1,000 this year.
I'll move that we approve $1,000 for the education program.
Second.
Okay, that's moved and seconded at 1,000. Discussion?
I'll just comment that, I've was able to witness some of the programs they do for local elementary schools about bringing the kids out to Ray Creek and educating them about that environment. It's, mainly done by volunteers, so I think it's a great thing that they bring to the community.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question, and this is on giving them 1,000. All in favor? Opposed? That one's carried at 1,000. So we've got 4,000 left. Next up is the Capital Region Food and Agriculture Initiatives Roundtable. They haven't previously requested money, now they're asking for 500. sorry,
I believe the total's a little different.
3,300 left.
3,300 left. Okay, oh, thank you.
Can we just, sorry, Chair?
Yep.
Can we, list off the ones that we still are
The-
looking at?
CRD Food and Agriculture Initiatives asking for 500, Bike to Work Society at 1,000, Kitty Hawk asking for 1,000, Navy League of Canada asking for 1,500. Those, and then we've got the BC Aviation Museum asking,
Right.
tabled. So more
Okay.
than 3,300 in requests still out there. Okay, so CRD Regional Food and Agriculture Initiatives Roundtable. Would someone like to propose a motion? Councillor Rentoul?
I'll move funding is denied.
I'll second.
That's moved and seconded. That was quick. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. That one's denied. Greater Victoria Bike to Work Society. They're asking for 1,000. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move 500.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So that's 500.
Where are we at?
1,300 left?
2,800.
2,800 left. Okay. And we've got Kitty Hawk requesting 1,000, Navy League requesting 1,500, and we still have the Aviation Museum. That collectively totals 3,000, which is 200 more than we've got left. So, let's start with Kitty Hawk. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move, giving an amount of 750.
Okay, that's moved by Councillor Garnett. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Rintoul. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. That's 750. Now the Navy League of Canada.
I'll move that we approve 750.
Okay,
Second.
and that's seconded. Any discussion on that one? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That one's carried as well. That got us through the list, so now we need a motion to lift the motion from the table.
Also move.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Okay, so now we have the motion to approve 500 for the BC Aviation Museum. And we have 1,300 left, yeah. So, but the motion is for 500, and I believe there was some interest in potentially revisiting something else as well.
Saanich Marine Rescue.
Yeah. So, do we need any further discussion on the 500 for the Aviation Museum? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That one's carried at 500. Okay, and now we have 800 left over, which we could leave, or we could allocate it.
I'll move the $800 be allocated to Saanich Marine Rescue.
Second.
Okay, that's moved and seconded. Discussion on the merits of that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, that gets us through that item. And earlier in the discussion, we had the question about should some of these be made line items. Does committee want to deal with that tonight? Councillor O'Keefe?
No.
Okay, was that a motion to
That's the
adjourn?
shortest answer. Well, not at this time. So how about I make a motion that we defer discussion to this to a future committee of the whole.
Okay, so that's
Is,
a motion of about a general discussion on grants and aid to a future committee of the whole?
yes.
Okay.
Is that appropriate?
You made the motion. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Seconded. It was appropriate.
And and the reason I'd like to wait is I'd like us to, maybe staff could provide to us prior to that discussion. I'd like to take an inventory of you know, there's a number of line items already for different things, for arts, for emergency services, for economic development. So before getting into this discussion, I'd like to see those all itemized, what they are and how much they
So
are.
This would be line items for external organizations.
Right, so I think in the discussion tonight, there was mention of there's $500 already a line item for the film commission. So I don't know if there's other things like that as well. So it'd be nice to get an inventory of all those sort of by category, by economic development, by however staff thinks it's appropriate to break it out. And then we have a clear idea of, okay, we're already providing X amount of money for arts here, here for economic development, and kind of get a better picture of what it looks like.
Councillor Fallon?
And just further to that, I would also ask staff to include the 3 times $500 to the churches.
Councillor Duncan?
I would also, we have the last year's requests and approvals, and we know that a number of these come year after year, and they see that. But I'm wondering if we could have, you know, just kind of this summary for maybe the past 5 years or something, just so we can kind of see which ones are coming back every year and what is it the amount that they're requesting, so that as we're looking at those line items and some of them are being considered as should this be a line item instead, we got an idea of relatively what they would be asking for relative to what we already have as line items.
Councillor O'Keefe?
And I guess other things that come to my mind are recreational type stuff. So we were like Rotary Park, I think was something else. And then there's recreation stuff in here as well. And I don't know how much we also provide to Panorama. So there's a whole pile of different things, I think, wrapped up in that.
I think we want to be clear what we're looking for staff to do. Panorama is a CRD service levy.
Right, okay,
It's actually a tax that
Okay.
we've agreed to.
okay,
Yep, okay.
okay. Well, even, so yeah, so that makes sense about Panorama. But some other things like Rotary Park, I mean, it would just be good to know what we're.
I could suggest, things that have at one time been grants and aid that got moved to line items are probably what we're most interested in.
Okay,
That's just
Sure.
a suggestion.
yeah.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Do we also want to have some discussion at that future committee of the whole about criteria for awarding grants?
Yes.
And I don't think that's really something we could look to staff to give us something on. I suppose we could ask, if you'd like.
Yeah, my suggestion would be there's probably criteria in other municipalities that we could, you know, ask staff to at least provide some summary in terms of what other municipalities are doing within the CRD. The motion as was worded originally, I was leery of because it was very open around a discussion, but I like, you know, looking to staff for some guidance on this moving forward, so I'm supportive of the motion that's on the floor.
Okay, anything further on this? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Is it appropriate to adjourn now? Oh, Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I do have a motion arising from our business with regards to grants and aid, and the motion is that with the letters going out to the organizations that we've agreed to support this year, that we request that in their statements, financial statements in the future, that they list the Town of Sydney grant as a separate revenue source and other municipal grants as well.
Second.
That's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So that's moved. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Fallon. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We're adjourned. Thank you.